They laughed. They pointed. They raised their glasses. And then they poured red wine all over him. Right there in the middle of the restaurant. The man didn't scream. He didn't fight back. He didn't even wipe his face. He just stood there, silent, soaked, and humiliated. What they didn't know was this. In less than 2 minutes, every single worker in that restaurant would lose their job. The manager would fall to his knees. And the man they called Nobody was actually the owner of the entire company. The restaurant was one of the most expensive in the city. Crystal chandeliers, soft jazz music, gold-lined menus. A place where the rich came to feel important. That evening, a man walked in wearing a plain brown jacket, old shoes, and no watch. His hair was slightly unkempt. His face calm, almost tired. People looked at him, then quickly looked away. He didn't belong here. Or at least that's what they thought. He quietly took a seat at a corner table. No phone. No bodyguard. No flashy car keys on the table. Just a man awaiting. A waitress approached him with a forced smile. "Sir," she said, scanning him up and down, "this restaurant is quite expensive." The man nodded politely. "I know." She frowned. "Our cheapest meal is $200. "I'll be fine," he replied calmly. She sighed, rolled her eyes, and walked away. At the counter, she whispered to another worker, loud enough for others to hear. "He's probably here to beg for leftovers." They laughed. The manager glanced over, smirked, and said, "Just don't let him embarrass us." When the man ordered only water and bread, the jokes intensified. A waiter muttered, "Why don't you try the soup kitchen across the street?" Another said, "Maybe he's lost." Customers began staring. Some shook their heads. Some laughed softly. One rich young man at a nearby table raised his glass and said loudly, "To people who know their place." More laughter. The quiet man lowered his eyes, but said nothing. Then it happened. A server carrying a tray of expensive wine stopped beside him. "Oops," she said sarcastically, and tilted the glass. Red wine spilled all over his jacket, down his shirt, onto the floor. Gasps filled the room. The server laughed. "Oh, relax," she said. "It's just wine. You probably can't afford it anyway." The manager didn't stop her. Instead he said, "Sir, you're disturbing our guests. You should leave." The man slowly stood up, wine dripping from his clothes. Still calm. He looked around the room. Then he said one sentence. "Is everyone here employed by Volcrest Holdings?" Silence. The manager froze. "Yes," the manager replied nervously. "So what?" The man reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and made one call. "Cancel tonight's inspection," he said quietly. "I'm already here." He ended the call. Then he looked directly at the manager. "My name is Daniel Vance." The room went silent. One worker dropped a tray, because everyone in that restaurant knew that name. Daniel Vance, founder, CEO, owner of Volcrest Holdings, the company that owned the restaurant, the building, the entire chain, and the jobs of everyone standing there. The manager's face turned pale. That's not funny," he stammered. Daniel calmly pulled out an ID, placed it on the table. The manager looked, and collapsed into a chair. Workers whispered. Customers stood up. The waitress who poured the wine started shaking. I didn't know," she cried. "I swear." Daniel looked at his stained jacket, then at her. "Did you ask?" he said softly. She couldn't answer. Daniel turned to the manager. "Tell me," he said calmly, "is this how you treat people you think are poor?" The manager fell to his knees. "I'm sorry. Please. I have kids." Daniel nodded. "So do many people who walk in here looking for dignity." He stood tall, and said clearly, "You're fired." He pointed. "You're fired." One by one. Every worker who laughed. Every worker who insulted. Every worker who watched and did nothing. The restaurant emptied in minutes. One young busboy remained. He had quietly handed Daniel a napkin earlier, without laughing, without judging. Daniel noticed him. "What's your name?" Daniel asked. "Ethan," the boy replied nervously. "You're promoted," Daniel said, "to manager." The boy burst into tears. Daniel paid for every meal that night, left a massive tip, then walked out quietly. As he reached the door, he turned back and said, "Never mistake silence for weakness, and never judge a man by his clothes." The doors closed, and the lesson echoed louder than any insult ever could. This story moved you. If it reminded you to treat people with respect, subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Because you never know who someone truly is until it's too late.